Commander Kevin Hayes stood in the observation deck of Genesis Prime Station and looked at the stars. In the distance, something dark moved through the black. It was not one ship. It was not 10 ships. It was a fleet so large that it blotted out entire star systems behind it. The Varth Collective was coming. Kevin was 53 years old. He had spent his entire adult life protecting humanity. He had seen wars, seen colonies burn, seen good people die. But he had never seen anything like this. The reports from the Galaxy Council had been clear. The Varth did not negotiate. The Varth did not lose. In the last 10 years, they had conquered 37 alien civilizations. Every single one had surrendered without real resistance. The Zelthian Empire folded in 3 months. The Krell Alliance lasted only 5 days. The Varth Collective surrendered before the first shot was fired. All of them had the same message. The Varth were too strong. Fighting was useless. Better to accept surrender and keep your people alive than watch them die in a war. You could not win. Kevin's second in command, Captain Linda Morris, entered the observation deck. She was younger than Kevin, only 41, but she was the smartest officer he had ever worked with. She did not move like someone bringing good news. Her face was tight. Her jaw was clenched. The Varth issued their demand, Linda said. She held a datapad in her hand. They want all human worlds and fleets surrendered within 72 hours. If we do not comply, they will destroy everything. They made it clear. No negotiation. No mercy. Kevin did not look away from the approaching fleet. What does Earth Command say? They are divided, Linda said. Half want to fight. Half want to surrender like everyone else. The Council is arguing right now. They want your recommendation. Kevin thought about the people on Earth. Billions of them. He thought about the colonies scattered across the frontier. Miners, farmers, scientists, children. All of them looking to him to keep them safe. And now they wanted him to choose between 2 impossible options. Surrender or die trying. Where are the other species? Kevin asked. Running, Linda said. The Zelthian government is hiding in deep space. The Marith are offering tribute money if the Varth will just leave them alone. Even the Krell, who are twice our size, are asking if we will join them and retreat. Kevin finally turned from the window. And what do you think, Linda? Linda did not hesitate. I think the Varth are counting on fear. I think they have seen every species they have ever fought surrender without a real battle, and they believe we will do the same. But I also think we do not know what they are truly capable of. Maybe they are that strong. Maybe surrender really is the smart choice. But you do not believe that, Kevin said. No, Linda said. I do not. But I am not the one making the choice. Kevin looked at the datapad. The Varth fleet was 40 hours away now. If they did not respond with a surrender in 72 hours, the collective would arrive at Earth and the human colonies with enough firepower to kill everyone on the surface. That was not fear talking. That was math. The Varth had ships that could crack planets. Humanity had good ships, but not good enough. Call for a video conference with Earth Command, Kevin said, and have Dr. Paul Martinez brought to my office. If we are going to fight this thing, I need to know everything about the Varth. 2 hours later, Kevin sat across from Dr. Martinez in his small office. The doctor was 60 years old and had spent his entire career studying alien languages and cultures. If anyone understood the Varth, it would be him. What do we know? Kevin asked. Martinez opened his own datapad. Very little, to be honest. The Varth do not communicate much. They issue demands and expect surrender. But from the scattered contacts we have had with other species, I can tell you this. The Varth are not wild animals acting on pure aggression. They are organized. They follow patterns. They have a structure and a system. Can we beat them? Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Not with weapons alone. Not if what the other species say is true about their fleet size and strength. But Commander, I have been thinking about this. Every species that faced the Vorath surrendered immediately. The Zelthians tried to run instead of fight. No one has actually stood up to them. No one has said no and meant it. Kevin leaned back in his chair. You think our response matters? You think they care whether we surrender because we are afraid or because we are brave? I think, Martinez said carefully, that creatures who have never been told might not know how to handle it. That night, Kevin made his decision. He recorded a message to Earth Command and the human colonies throughout the frontier. His voice was steady. His words were clear. The Vorath Collective has given us a choice. Surrender or die. I am telling you now, we will not surrender. We will stand and fight. I do not know if we will win. I do not know if we will survive. But I know this much. Humanity does not go into the dark quietly. We do not bend our knees to conquerors just because they are strong. If we must die, we will die as humans have always died. Fighting. Fighting for our people. Fighting for our right to exist. The Vorath think they will walk through our defenses and find us waiting to hand over everything. They are wrong. They will find us with weapons in our hands and fire in our hearts. He sent the message across every channel. He authorized all military personnel to prepare for combat. He ordered all civilian ships to begin evacuation from the forward colonies. And then he waited. The response from Earth came in 3 hours. Half the command council wanted him tried for treason. Half wanted to throw their support behind him. The President of Earth herself came on the line. She looked tired. She looked scared. But when she spoke, her voice did not waver. We are with you, Commander. Do whatever you need to do to protect our people. But if we are going to fight, we fight to win. Kevin looked at Linda. She was smiling, just slightly. Let us show the galaxy what humanity is made of, he said. He ordered the first attack. Small fighters launched from Genesis Prime Station, heading straight for the approaching Vorath fleet. It was a suicide mission by any normal measure. The Vorath ships were massive. The human fighters were tiny, but they came anyway, because Kevin Hayes had given them permission to say no. And that made all the difference. The Vorath did not expect the attack. That was the only reason it worked. 20 human fighter jets launched from Genesis Prime and burned hard toward the incoming fleet. It was reckless. It was desperate. It was the smartest thing Kevin Hayes had ever done. Aaron Foster piloted the lead fighter. He was only 28 years old, born in one of the outer colonies. He had never thought he would save the galaxy. He had just wanted to fly fast and keep people alive. But when the order came through, he did not hesitate. His hands were steady on the controls as he pushed his fighter to maximum speed. The Vorath ships were so large that Aaron's entire fighter could have fit inside their cargo base. The biggest Vorath warship was 3 kilometers long. It looked like a mountain of metal with weapons attached to every surface. When it tried to shoot at the human fighters, the energy blast was so powerful it shook Aaron's small vessel like a leaf in a hurricane. But the Vorath had never fought anything this small and this fast before. Every conquered species had used ships that moved slowly, that could be targeted easily. Human fighters were different. They dodged. They accelerated. They moved in ways the Vorath systems did not expect. Aaron led his squadron toward the biggest Vorath ship. The weapons officer, Captain Linda Morris, was back at Genesis Prime, watching through the sensors. She guided them like a chess player moving pieces across a board. Veer left. Linda's voice came through Aaron's radio. The Vorath defense grid has a gap there. They are moving to fill it, but you will have 3 seconds before they can establish cover. 3 seconds, Aaron. That is all we need." Aaron moved left. The stars twisted around him. His body felt heavy from the acceleration, but his eyes stayed sharp. He could see the gap Linda was talking about. There was a moment, just a moment, where the Varus ship's defenses were not completely covered. He fired. The missile streaked forward. It was not as powerful as the Varus weapons. Humanity could not compete on raw force. But Aaron's missile was smart. It had been designed to find weak points in armor. It was designed to slip through gaps and find the things underneath. The missile hit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Varus ship shuddered. A section of its hull fractured. Not destroyed, but damaged. The first real damage the Varus had taken in 10 years. And then the other human fighters attacked. They did not try to fight the Varus head-to-head. They could not win that way. Instead, they used deception. Some fighters released decoy signals, while others came in from unexpected angles. Some fired on empty space to draw the Varus weapons, while the real attack came from somewhere else. It was dance. It was chaos. It was the kind of fighting that only people who had nothing left to lose would try. The Varus lost another ship. One of their smaller cruisers took too much damage and vented atmosphere into space. The shields flickered. The weapons stopped firing. Back on Genesis Prime, Kevin watched the battle unfold on his screens. Around him, officers were reacting with shock and disbelief. One of them was laughing. Another was crying. They had actually hurt the Varus. The Varus fleet stopped advancing. For 6 hours, the ships hung in space, unmoving. Kevin knew what was happening. The collective was trying to understand what had just occurred. For 10 years, they had expected every species to collapse at the first sign of aggression. They had never had to actually fight. They had never had to adapt that then the Varus fleet moved again. But this time, they were slower, more cautious. They started using different tactics. Better tactics. The second wave of combat was harder. The Varus had learned something from the first attack. Their defenses were tighter. Their weapons were placed more strategically. But by then, Kevin had already moved all his ships. New fighters launched. Reinforcements came from the colonies. More decoy ships. More confusion. More chaos. This time, the Varus lost 3 ships. 2 cruisers and one of their smaller destroyers. Over 1,000 Varus soldiers died. For a species that had conquered 37 civilizations without real resistance, it was a shocking cost. Dr. Martinez was watching from a station when the news spread through the galaxy. The humans had fought the Varus and lived. More than that, they had won. They had actually damaged the collective fleet. Within hours, communications started arriving from other species. The Zelthian government wanted to know if humans could help them. The Marth sent a message saying they wanted to take back their surrender. Even the Krell, who were fighting their own retreat, sent encrypted signals asking for cooperation. The galaxy was waking up. On the human colony worlds, people gathered in the streets. They watched the news feeds. They saw their fighters dancing around the Varus ships, attacking, retreating, attacking again. They saw their people refuse to accept defeat. And in that refusal, something changed. Fear turned to hope. Despair turned to determination. Kevin received a message from Earth's president. Simple words. Clear words. You did it, Commander. The entire world is watching. The entire galaxy is watching. What happens next? What happened next was that Kevin called for all available human military units. He ordered the colonies to send their best pilots and their strongest ships. He told Dr. Martinez to continue studying everything they could learn about Varus behavior. And he told Linda Morris to plan something even more ambitious. We are not just defending anymore, Kevin said in his briefing to the command staff. We are not just trying to survive. We are going to strike directly at the heart of this fleet. We are going to show the Varth that humanity does not just resist. Humanity fights back. Linda nodded slowly. You want to hit their command vessel? I do, Kevin said. Every Vorath fleet has a center, a flagship where their commanders direct the battle. If we can get to that ship, if we can disrupt their command structure, we can win this war. It was impossible. It was crazy. It was the kind of plan that made normal military officers recommend a psychiatric evaluation. But every person in that room understood something important. The Vorath had never fought creatures like humans before. Creatures who did not know when to surrender. Creatures who got stronger when they were desperate. As Aaron Foster prepared his fighter for the next mission, he thought about his family back on the colony. He thought about all the people who were counting on him. He thought about Linda and Kevin and all the others who had refused to accept defeat. He smiled and climbed into his cockpit. The Vorath had conquered the galaxy by making everyone give up, but they had never met humans before, and humans did not give up. Dr. Paul Martinez was reading through Vorath communication logs when he noticed something strange. One of the signals was different from the others. While most Vorath messages were cold and direct, this one carried something else. Doubt. The signal had been sent by a Vorath officer named Zekthar. He was a commander in the fleet, responsible for coordinating defensive actions. And in his encrypted message to other officers, he was asking questions no Vorath commander had asked in generations. Why do we conquer? What do we gain from endless expansion? Is there another way? Martinez brought his discovery to Kevin immediately. The commander listened carefully, his face showing no emotion until the doctor finished. You think we can talk to him? Kevin said. I think, Martinez replied, that the Vorath are not what we believed. I think their expansion is not a choice they make freely. I think it is something they do because it is what they have always done. But somewhere inside, some of them are questioning that path. Kevin stood and walked to the observation window. The Vorath fleet was still maintaining their position. After the human attacks, they had stopped advancing. Now they were simply waiting, hanging in space like a storm cloud before it breaks open. If you try to contact them, Kevin said slowly, the hardline Vorath leaders will know. They might execute him. They might execute you. Is it worth the risk? The question is not whether it is worth the risk, Martinez said. The question is whether fighting this war forever is worth the cost. We can keep attacking them. We can win tactical victories. But there are more Vorath ships coming. Every day we fight, more military units from their territory arrive. Kevin, we cannot win this war through military force alone. But if we can change the minds of the Vorath themselves, if we can show them that there is another way, then maybe we do not have to fight at all. Kevin took a long breath. Then he nodded. Contact him. Carefully. Use the civilian communications channels. Make it look like an accident if you have to. 2 days later, Martinez was talking to Zekthar directly. The Vorath commander looked different than Martinez had expected. Vorath were not beautiful by human standards. They had hard, angular faces and skin that looked like metal. Their eyes were cold and distant. But when Zekthar spoke, there was something there. Something that looked like loneliness. Why are you contacting me? Zekthar asked in accented standard English. I am the enemy. You should want me dead. Because, Martinez said carefully, I read your message to the other officers. I read your questions. And I think you are not the only one asking them. I think there are more Vorath who wonder if endless conquest is the right path. I think there are Vorath who want something different. Zekthar was silent for a long moment. If the collective leadership knew we were communicating, they would execute me. They would execute my family. This is not caution. This is certainty. I know, Martinez said. and I am grateful that you are willing to take that risk. I need to understand your people, not to defeat you, to save you." Slowly, over 3 days of encrypted conversations, Zekthar told Martinez the truth about the Varth Collective, that the Varth had not always been conquerors. Centuries ago, they had been a peaceful species. They had built art and music and philosophy. But then a plague had come. The plague had killed half their population. In desperation, they had begun to expand, taking worlds and resources to ensure survival. That expansion had worked. They had survived. But over the generations, the expansion had become an end in itself. The Vorath had created a system where the military consumed most resources, where young people were taught that conquest was honor, where questioning the path of expansion was considered weakness. The plague was gone now, had been gone for 100 years. But the system remained. "We are trapped," Zekthar told Martinez. "Not by enemy armies. We are trapped by ourselves, by what we have become. And I do not know how to change it." Martinez thought about this. He thought about species throughout history that had gone to war and kept going to war, not because they needed to, but because war was what they knew. He thought about systems so large that no single person could change them. "Maybe," Martinez said slowly, "you do not have to change the whole system. Maybe you just have to show people that there is another choice. You have to show them that surrender is not the only response to resistance. That understanding is possible." Martinez brought Zekthar's thoughts to Kevin. The commander listened, and then he made a decision that shocked everyone. Kevin issued an order that limited human attacks. He told his forces to be defensive instead of aggressive. He told Linda to stop planning strikes on the Varth command vessel. And he sent a message directly to the Varth fleet. "We do not want war," Kevin said in the message. "We want peace. We want to talk to you about a better way for both our species. Send someone to negotiate. Send someone brave enough to imagine change." The Varth response came 12 hours later. It was a video message from the hardline commanders. They called Kevin weak. They called his peace offer a trap. They demanded unconditional surrender or destruction. But something else happened too. Zekthar sent a private message to Martinez. "You have created a choice," the Vorth commander said. "The hardline leaders have chosen war. But now all of us know that another choice exists. Now we must choose." In the weeks that followed, something unexpected occurred. Vorath officers began to defect. One by one, they took their ships and broke from the collective. Some came to the human side. Others simply left, refusing to participate in the conquest anymore. The Varth fleet was splitting apart from the inside, on Genesis Prime. Kevin watched as the number of Varth ships in the collective fleet decreased every day. The hardliners still wanted to fight, still believed in conquest. But more and more Varth were listening to Zekthar. More and more were questioning the path they had been following for so long. Dr. Martinez sat in his small office, reading through communication after communication from Varth soldiers who wanted to understand the human perspective. They asked questions about art and family and what humans valued. They asked about a universe where expansion was not the only goal. One message came from a young Varth pilot named Kesh. She was only 19 years old, barely adult by Varth standards. She wrote, "I do not remember a time before war. My entire life, I have been told that conquest is honor. But when I see humans choosing mercy instead of vengeance, choosing communication instead of violence, I wonder if I have been taught a lie. I want to know if there is something else." Martinez replied carefully, explaining human values. Explaining that strength did not have to mean dominance. Explaining that the best parts of humanity came not from conquering others, but from understanding them. By the time 2 weeks had passed, Half of the Vorath fleet had left the collective. Zekthar sent a message to Kevin. Simple words. Important words. The choice you offered has given us hope. Not all of us will take it. The hardliners will fight to the end. But now we know that another way exists. That is enough. Kevin looked at Linda and smiled. The real battle, he said, is just beginning. And this time, we might actually win without destroying everything. The hardline Vorath commanders were furious. They saw the defections not as a natural response, but as betrayal. And traitors, they decided, must be punished. The Vorath collective launched their largest assault yet. But this time, they were not just attacking humans. They were attacking the Vorath worlds that had joined Zekthar in choosing peace. They were bombing colonies where defectors had come from. They were making a message clear. Change your mind or watch your families die. Kevin received the reports while standing in the command center. 3 Vorath colony worlds were under attack. 2 human frontier settlements were being bombarded. The defecting Vorath were asking for help. And for the first time in this war, Kevin did not have to think about what to do. All available forces, he said to Linda. We defend them, human and Vorath together. This is what we have been building toward. Linda nodded and gave the orders. It was the first coordinated human Vorath military operation. As human ships launched from Genesis Prime, Vorath vessels that had defected to the peace side rose up to meet them. Pilots from 2 species, flying toward a common enemy, moving to protect innocent people. Aaron Foster found himself flying alongside a Vorath pilot named Kesh. The young Vorath woman had volunteered for the mission, even though it meant fighting against her own species. As their fighters accelerated toward the collective fleet, Aaron heard her voice on the shared radio channel. Thank you, she said, her Vorath accent strange but clear in basic English, for not leaving us to die alone. That is not what humans do, Aaron replied. We protect people worth protecting. The battle was chaos and thunder. Massive Vorath warships fired on the human Vorath alliance from all sides. The defectors, who had less powerful ships than the hardliners, moved in close and used human tactics, evasion, deception, unexpected moves. Vorath soldiers, who had only known rigid military strategy, suddenly learned how to fight dirty and smart. A Vorath cruiser was closing in on Aaron's position. His weapons were locked on, but the angle was bad. He would take damage if he tried to attack. And then Kesh's fighter came out of nowhere, screaming between Aaron and the enemy ship. She fired her weapons directly into the collective cruiser's engine section. Move, she commanded. Now, Aaron accelerated away. The collective ship turned to follow Kesh instead. Her fighter was smaller and slower than Aaron's. She could not outrun it. She could not fight it head-to-head. But she did not try. Instead, she flew in complex patterns, buying Aaron time to reposition. Then Aaron's weapon system chimed. He had a target lock. He fired. The missile shrieked forward and hit the collective cruiser's already damaged engines. The ship vented atmosphere and fire. Its weapons went dark. It was a victory. Small and local. But it meant something important. It meant that Vorath and human could work together. That they could trust each other with their lives around the galaxy. Other battles were happening. Humans died protecting Vorath civilians. Vorath soldiers threw themselves in front of human fire to save human children. These were not soldiers fighting for strategy anymore. These were people fighting for each other. Back on Genesis Prime, Kevin watched the reports come in. The tide was turning. The defecting Vorath ships were holding. The human forces were cutting through the collective's attack lines. But something else was happening too. Zekthar was sending messages to other Vorath commanders in the collective fleet. Not threats. Not military orders. Just communication. Vorath speaking to Vorath. Look at what we are doing, Zekthar's message said. We are destroying our own people. Destroying other Vorath who chose to question the path we have always followed. Is this what we believe in? Is this the honor we claim? Or have we become something so twisted that we cannot even recognize it anymore? The message spread through the collective fleet, and something happened that hardline Vorath commanders never expected. Some ships stopped firing. Some commanders refused to continue the attack against their own species. Some Vorath soldiers opened the communication channels and simply said no. The battle was not clean. The fighting continued for 17 hours straight. There were casualties. Good people died. Both humans and Vorath, who were brave and kind and deserved to live, fell in combat. But slowly, inevitably, the collective's assault broke apart. The last moment of the battle came when Aaron Foster's squadron made a final run toward the main collective flagship. It was a suicide mission. 30 human fighters against the largest Vorath warship ever built. The odds were impossible, but Aaron's fighter was low on fuel. He had used everything protecting others. He had one last missile left. One last chance to do something that mattered. He locked onto the flagship and fired. As the missile flew forward, he saw another fighter coming toward him. It was a Vorath ship from the Hardline Collective. A fighter with a pilot who had chosen loyalty to the old system over everything else. The Vorath pilot fired. Aaron's shields flared. His engine compartment took damage. His system screamed warnings at him. He could not dodge. He could not escape. The Vorath fighter was coming directly at him, and the collision would be fatal. And then Kesh appeared from nowhere. Her fighter moved between Aaron and the incoming Vorath missile. She took the full impact. Her ship shattered. For a moment, her voice came through the radio, calm and clear. Tell my people that there was another way. Tell them I chose it. Then she was gone. Aaron watched his screens as her life signs disappeared. He watched as her fighter became debris floating in space. And something broke inside him. Not his courage. Not his determination. But something in the way humans and Vorath saw each other changed in that moment. A Vorath had died protecting a human. Aaron's missile struck the collective flagship. The impact was devastating. The Hardline Commander's command center was destroyed. Their coordination failed. Their fleet, already weakened by internal defection, simply fell apart. The collective had lost, but the cost was measured not in victory points, but in the faces of those who had died. Kesh's body became the symbol of the battle. A young Vorath woman who had chosen peace and paid the price for it. Her image spread through both the human fleet and the defecting Vorath ships. A reminder that the cost of change was real, but that the choice was worth making. When the final collective ships retreated, pulling back from the frontier to reorganize, Zekthar sent a message to Kevin. It was short and heavy with meaning. We are no longer one species, Zekthar said. We are two. Those who choose peace and those who choose the old ways. But know this, Commander. You have shown us that another path exists. You have paid in blood to prove it. That means something to my people. That means everything. On Genesis Prime, Kevin stood in the observation deck again. He looked out at the stars where Kesh had made her final choice. He looked at the damage to his station, the wounded soldiers in the medical bays, the families who would not see their loved ones again, and he understood something crucial. The military battle was over, but the real battle was just beginning. The battle to build something new, to prove that humans and Vorath could do more than survive together. They could actually trust each other. Linda came to stand beside him. We won, she said. We won, Kevin agreed. But now comes the hard part. We have to make sure it was worth it. 6 months after the final battle, Kevin Hayes stood on a colony world and watched children play. Human children and Vorath children. They ran together across open fields, their laughter carrying on the wind. The Vorath children were learning to play like humans, with joy instead of aggression. The human children were learning from Vorath culture, learning patience and strength. They were learning each other. The galaxy had changed completely. The Vorath collective, faced with mass defection and military defeat, had been forced to make a choice. Zekthar had emerged as the new leader of the Vorath people. His first act was to dissolve the collective system entirely. The military would no longer consume most of the government's resources. Conquest would no longer be the measure of success. Instead, the Vorath would rebuild. They would learn. The hardline commanders who refused to accept this change had been allowed to leave. They took their ships and disappeared into deep space, bitter about a future they could not control. They were no longer a threat. They were simply ghosts of an old system that the universe had moved past. On Earth, Kevin had chosen to leave his command position. He had spent enough time in military uniforms. Now he worked with the Council of Peaceful Expansion, helping to settle disputes between the many species who wanted to build something new. His home was still small. His life was still simple. But it carried a different kind of weight now. Not the weight of command. The weight of responsibility to a future. Linda Morris had taken over as commander of Genesis Prime. She was good at it. She was fair. She was strong without being cruel. The station had been redesigned. Half of it was now dedicated to research and cultural exchange. The weapons were still there, but they were not the focus anymore. Dr. Paul Martinez had realized his dream. He established the Institute of Cross-Species Understanding, a research center dedicated to helping different species communicate and cooperate. It was located on a neutral world, open to any species willing to work for peace. Vorath and humans worked side by side there, studying each other's languages and cultures. Martinez discovered that the Vorath had been creating art and poetry for thousands of years. They had simply stopped when conquest became their only goal. Now artists from both species were collaborating, creating works that neither species could have imagined alone. Aaron Foster had become a flight instructor. He trained pilots, both human and Vorath, in combined operations and cooperative tactics. His students learned that flying alongside an alien was not so different from flying alongside a human partner. You had to trust them. You had to understand how they thought. And if you could do those things, you could accomplish miracles together. Kesha's memory had become important to both species. A memorial had been built on the colony world where she died. It showed her in flight, her Vorath form cutting through space with human grace. The inscription was simple. She chose peace. Both humans and Vorath pilgrims came to honor her sacrifice, but the galaxy did not stay peaceful simply because Vorath and humans had learned to cooperate. Other challenges emerged. The Zelthian Empire, energized by human resistance, began to organize against other potential conquerors. The Marath demanded compensation for the years they had spent in hiding. The Krell wanted to reclaim worlds they had lost. The galaxy was waking up. Species that had accepted domination for generations were suddenly asking why. Some of this was good. Species freed themselves from oppression. Worlds declared independence. Governments were reformed to serve their people instead of a distant emperor. But some conflict was inevitable. Some wars still happened. Some species still chose domination over cooperation. Kevin understood this. He had never believed that one military victory would change everything. But he also understood that something fundamental had shifted. When the Vorath fell, when the Empire of Conquest dissolved, it sent a message across the galaxy. It was possible to say no. It was possible to survive saying no. It was possible to build something better. 2 years after the final battle, Zekthar came to Earth. He walked through the streets of the capital city, meeting with human leaders. Kevin took him to see the monuments of human history. Zekthar was fascinated by stories of human wars, human conflicts, human growth. He began to understand that humans had been fighting for freedom and dignity for their entire existence. That resistance was in their nature. Your species learned something that takes minds centuries to understand, Zekthar told Kevin as they stood overlooking the city. You learned that courage is not just military strength. Courage is the choice to stand up to the impossible and say, I will not surrender. Not because I will win, but because I must try. Kevin nodded. And your people are learning something too. You are learning that strength does not have to mean domination. That a powerful species can choose mercy. That conquering others is not the only way to be important in the galaxy. We were so lost, Zekthar said, his voice carrying the weight of billions of his people's choices. For so long, we were lost in a system that ate us from the inside. We did not know there was another way. Now you know, Kevin said. And now you get to choose. Every day, you get to choose who you want to be. 5 years after the final battle, something unexpected happened. A species from the far edge of the galaxy appeared. They were peaceful, curious about this strange region where conquest no longer ruled. They had heard stories about humans in Vorath, about impossible resistance and unlikely cooperation. They asked if they could learn. If they could stay and study how such different species had learned to trust each other. Kevin welcomed them without hesitation. The galaxy slowly began to organize differently. Instead of conquerors and conquered, there were partners. Species that had never met began to communicate. Trade networks expanded. Joint research projects were launched. The University of Cross-Species Learning, established at Paul Martinez's institute, began to produce scholars and leaders who understood that diversity was a strength, not a threat. There were still conflicts. There were still disagreements. But the system of absolute conquest had died. The assumption that might made right had been challenged and found wanting. Kevin spent his later years, as he had requested, quietly, working with refugees and displaced people, building new settlements on colony worlds, creating places where multiple species could live in peace. It was not glory. It was not the kind of work that made history books. But when Kevin walked through these settlements, saw families of different species building lives together, he knew he had accomplished something real. Linda retired from Genesis Prime at 65 years old. She and Kevin started a small farm together on a quiet colony world. They grew food. They raised animals. They lived simply. Sometimes they would stand together and watch sunsets. And Kevin would think about the young commander he had been, the one who had refused to surrender. Dr. Martinez never stopped working. He lived to see his institute expand to dozens of worlds. He trained thousands of cross-species mediators. He wrote books about language and culture. He became known throughout the galaxy as the person who had shown that understanding could be a weapon more powerful than any military arsenal. Aaron Foster had children. Human children who grew up with Vorath friends, who learned to value cooperation from their earliest years. He watched them and knew that they would never see the galaxy the way his generation had. For them, peace was not a fragile thing to protect. It was normal. It was expected. And Zekthar led the Vorath people toward a future they had never imagined. Poets became important again. Artists were celebrated. The young Vorath learned that strength could be expressed through creation as well as destruction. The Vorath would never stop being warriors. But they stopped being conquerors. On a memorial world where Kesh had fallen, a great statue was erected. It showed a human and a Vorath pilot, standing back to back, facing outward toward a future they were building together. Young people from both species came to stand before it, understanding that they owed their freedom, their peace, their possibility of a better future to those who had refused to surrender. The inscription on the memorial read simply, "Everyone surrendered to the conquering alien race except the humans." And in that refusal, they changed everything. They taught the galaxy that surrender was a choice, that resistance was possible, that building something new was worth the cost. Kevin Hayes lived long enough to see 3 generations born into peace. He lived long enough to see Varth children study human philosophy and human children study Varth mathematics. He lived long enough to see the galaxy transform. When he died, at the age of 87, he died knowing that the war had been worth fighting. Not because victory was glorious, but because what came after was better. Because he had taken the impossible choice to resist when everyone else surrendered, and turned it into hope God, the galaxy would remember his name. But more importantly, it would remember what he had stood for. The belief that another way was always possible. That surrender was not inevitable. That one species, one person, one moment of defiance could change everything. In the end, that was the real victory. Not the battle, the peace. Not the conquest, the cooperation. Not the surrender, the choice to stand and say yes to a future that was worth building.